The broadcast was everywhere, across the cold silence of space, through communication relays on distant moons, inside crowded stations, and peaceful colonies. The same nightmare played on every screen. People stopped moving. They stopped speaking. They stared with wide eyes, unable to believe what they were seeing. The image showed a human colony, small, quiet, peaceful, set against the silver-blue sky of a distant world. Children ran. Families smiled. There were no weapons, no soldiers, no warning. And then the attack began. Without mercy. Without words, the alien empire's warships rained destruction from the sky. Energy beams carved burning lines across the colony. Explosions tore through homes. The air was filled with screams, but the broadcast didn't stop. Cameras set up by the aliens captured every second, every cry, every death. The soldiers who landed were not there to take prisoners. They hunted the survivors through fire and rubble, and the feed kept rolling. The galaxy watched as innocent men, women, and children were slaughtered, live broadcasted as entertainment. As humiliation, the alien empire who committed the massacre had meant it as a warning to Earth. A message. They wanted to show that humans were weak, that they could not protect their own, that their place in the galaxy was beneath the boots of stronger powers. Alien overlords celebrated. They cheered in their cold halls of power as billions across the stars watched the horror unfold. But back on Earth, deep beneath the surface of the old continents, the real answer had already begun. The signal silent, invisible to the public left. Earth's dark side within minutes of the broadcast's first frames. It was not sent from a government office. It did not come from politicians. It came from deep command places that did not speak unless the very survival of the human race was threatened. Oh, the signal was short, precise, coded, and ancient. The words were clear: no more mercy. Far from the lights of human cities. Buried in cold oceans and under mountains of rock, the old shipyards lit up. Machines older than the colony itself groaned to life. Robotic arms moved with perfect precision as black metal took shape. Silent engines, weapons of impossible power. Armor designed to survive extinctional-level wars. Everything began to move, by piece, with the kind of cold, deliberate speed that only Earth's hidden war machine could manage. The Deathworlders had been patient. For decades, humans had been quiet, had traded, built, explored. They had shown mercy. But the massacre changed everything. Earth did not scream in anger. It did not threaten or rage. It simply acted. The ships being built were not ordinary. These were vessels of last resort creations from the ancient Terran wars when Earth had fought not for territory, but for survival. The Black Fleet, as some whispered it, existed only for one purpose: to end threats forever. To make sure no one ever again dared to raise a hand against humanity, the signal reached the fleet's silent AI course. Orders were accepted, coordinates locked, crews special, trained, born on the harshest edges of human space, were summoned. Without a single public word, no media broadcasts, no grand speeches. Earth's response would not come in words. It would come in fire in the alien empire's capital. As the celebration of the massacre reached its peak, the first whispers of unease began to spread. Not from the leaders who still laughed, but from traitors, spies, and those who remembered the old stories. The ones who remembered what humans had done in the past back when they had first taken to the stars and faced extermination. Stories of wars not for land or pride, but wars of survival where Earth had unleashed horrors that could not be forgotten. The leaders of the alien empire ignored the warnings. They saw humans as soft, weak, merciful. They forgot that Earth was a death world, a planet that had created life forms built to endure, to adapt, to survive anything. They forgot that every human carried that legacy in their blood. The warning signs were small at first. A listening post on the Empire's edge went silent. A scout ship vanished without trace. But by then, it was too late. Earth's fleet was already moving. Black ships with no identifying marks. Engines that ran colder than space itself. Weapons no one in the galaxy had seen used in centuries. The humans did not rush. They moved like predators, silent, patient, certain. They weren't coming for a negotiation. They weren't coming for revenge in the way the alien empire expected. They were coming to end it, and across every human world. Every colony, every station, people stopped what they were doing. They turned off their screens showing the massacre. They stood in silence, faces hard, eyes cold. No one cheered. No one celebrated because humans knew what was coming. They knew their answer would not be words. It would be action. The galaxy watched in confusion as Earth remained silent, but the survivors of the massacre, the families of the lost knew. They saw the lights of military transport ships leaving Earth's orbit. They saw the old war satellites turn toward the deep black. They heard the old terrible words whispered on every channel, "No more mercy." And somewhere in the deepest dark, the human fleet moved, unstoppable, unseen, and deadly. Across the cold silence of space, the galaxy held its breath. The massacre of the human colony still burned in the minds of millions. The images, the fire, the screams, the merciless slaughter were etched into every eye that had watched the broadcast. The alien empire that had unleashed the horror still celebrated in its high towers, mocking Earth's silence, calling humans weak and soft. Somewhere in the darkness, far beyond what the empire could see, Earth had already begun. To move, there were no public speeches, no angry broadcasts, no loud threats. The answer was quiet, terrifyingly quiet. In hidden shipyards beneath the icy seas of Neptune's moon, machines that had slept for decades rumbled awake. In deep underground bunkers on Mars, soldiers moved like shadows, their faces cold and unreadable. Across the scattered worlds of the human frontier, coded messages blinked to life. And special units, those who trained for wars that others had forgotten, packed their gear and boarded silent transports. The Black Fleet was coming. On Earth. Deep beneath the surface, where no civilian ever walked, Commander Nathan Cole stood in the command deck of Earth's oldest war bunker. The room was cold, metal walls lined with ancient screens and glowing maps. Around him, men and women in dark uniforms worked in calm, steady silence. No panic, no shouting, just focused purpose. Commander Cole's face was carved from stone sharp. Eyes, graying hair, a scar across one cheek. "I've fought in the old wars." He remembered what it meant when Earth said, "No more mercy." "The fleets are ready," an officer whispered, her voice flat. "All authorization codes accepted. We have total command." Cole nodded once. He turned his eyes to the central displays. Thousands of dots lit the galaxy map. Each one represented an Earth warship. Now awake and moving, they were fast. They were invisible to ordinary scanners. And they were armed with weapons the galaxy had not seen since the last time someone thought humanity could be broken. Target confirmed. Cole said quietly, "Begin full mobilization." The blackness of space, the ships moved. They didn't come in massive swarms. They didn't make a grand display. Instead, they came in small strike groups, each one surgical, precise. Warships shaped like black daggers drifted silently between stars. Stealth vessels, ghosts of the void, cut through dark corridors of space unnoticed. The Deathworlders didn't rush. They weren't here for rage. They were here to finish something. On the edges of the alien empire, the first signs appeared. Listening posts so confident went silent. Patrol ships vanished without trace. The Empire's generals, still drunk on their easy massacre, barely noticed at first. But the traitors, the smugglers, the old veterans, they knew. Remembered the stories of old Earth wars, the ones that ended in silence. In entire worlds going dark without warning in the Empire's central capital. Supreme Overlord Vrax dismissed the reports with a wave of his clawed hand. "Let them come," he sneered. "They are cowards. They will sue for peace soon enough." But deep in his mind, in the place where fear lived, he felt something cold begin to grow, because the humans were not responding the way others did. There were no envoys, no negotiations, only silence. The silence was worse than any threat. Meanwhile, on the human side, the soldiers moved with cold discipline. The Deathworlders were not ordinary troops. They were born from the harshest corners of Earth, places where survival shaped every breath. They were trained not for conquest, for one purpose: to end wars before they could ever begin again. In the belly of one of the lead warships, a ship called Eclipse, Captain Mara Hale checked her gear in the silence of the armory. Was expressionless. Her hands moved with calm precision as she locked her armor into place. Around her, her team did the same. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The mission was clear. A young soldier, barely more than a recruit, whispered. Through dry lips? Why? Why now? Why no warning? Mara didn't look up. She tightened the seal on her gauntlet. They made it public, she said softly. They showed the massacre to the galaxy.
Oh.
They wanted everyone to see it. So now, the galaxy will see this. Her words hung in the air like ice. The soldiers of Earth had no desire for blood. They were not here to conquer. But they understood something the alien empire had forgotten. Mercy had its limits. And when those limits were crossed, when the line was shattered, the Death Worlders answered without hesitation. The Black Fleet gathered speed in the Empire's outer colonies. The panic finally began to rise. Reports of missing ships, of shattered outposts, of entire communication hubs going dark flooded the Imperial channels. At first, the Empire's leaders laughed it off. Then they grew nervous, and then they grew silent. Because the humans weren't coming for battle, they were coming for a re-ar. In the dark of space, one alien admiral, one of the few with the courage to speak the old truth, whispered to his trembling crew, "We thought we knew war, but we forgot who they are." Human ships came closer, and the message, the signal that had awakened the Black Fleet, burned silently in every system. No more mercy. The blackness of space stretched wide and endless, cold and silent. But through that darkness, the ships came gliding like shadows, unseen by the eyes of those who had mocked them only days before. The human fleet, born from the ancient forges of Earth's deadliest wars, moved without sound, without signal, without fear. It was a fleet built not for show, not for diplomacy, but for one terrible purpose: to end the alien empire, still reeling from the first whispers of disappearances. Barely understood what was coming. On their central worlds, political leaders argued. Military commanders shouted over each other. They had seen the massacre of the human colony as a message of power, a symbol of strength. They believed Earth would beg for mercy, would fall to its knees as weaker species had before. But Earth had not spoken. Earth had not pleaded. And now, in the silence, something darker had awakened, far beyond the edges of Empire-controlled space. In the deep corridors of forgotten star systems, the Death Worlder fleet gathered in motion. Ship after ship, black and silent, formed kill. Groups that drifted between gravity wells and asteroid fields like hunters stalking prey. There were no bright flags, no proud signals. The ships bore no names painted on their hulls, only dark metal, scarred armor, and the quiet hum of engines that made no sound. On the bridge of the lead battleship Eclipse, Captain Mara Hale stood, motionless, her eyes fixed on the glowing map stretched before her. The stars glittered on the holographic display, each one marked with new designations, targets chosen with cold precision. Beside her, silent officers relayed data streams, their voices hushed, their faces carved from stone. The air was thick with tension, but not fear. There was no panic here. It's only focus. "We enter engagement distance in 6 hours," the navigation officer whispered. "Enemy scouts remain unaware." Hale gave the smallest nod. Her gloved hands rested behind her back, maintained blackout protocols. "We strike without warning." Her voice was quiet, calm, not anger, not revenge. This was duty pure and simple, out in the void. The alien empire's patrol ships drifted lazily, unaware of the black shapes closing in. The empire's generals had sent orders to bolster defenses, but they were too slow, too confident in their supposed superiority. Even now, the capital world celebrated their victory over the human colony, blind to the reality that death was already moving toward them faster than they could react. In one far-flung Imperial station, an alien technician caught the first. A glimpse of something wrong. The entire sensor grid went dark offline without cause. He ran diagnostics, recalibrated systems. But no signal came back. Moments later, another relay vanished. Then another. Panic sparked in his chest. He sent emergency reports up the chain. But by the time the Empire's admirals received the warnings, pieces in total silence. The Death Worlders struck like ghosts. The first engagement wasn't even a battle. A forward Imperial defense, Fleet 30 ships strong, disappeared within minutes. The human vessels closed in from impossible angles, moving at terrifying speed. Railguns fired without flash, missiles streaked with deadly precision. There were no calls for surrender, no demands. Every Imperial warship simply ceased to exist. In the distant Empire command chambers, news of the massacre arrived in cold, shattered fragments. Supreme Overlord Vrox's clawed hands, shaking for the first time in his reign, stared in disbelief at the data. His admirals stood frozen, speechless. The fleet was gone, not defeated, erased. Who? One general whispered, his voice barely audible. Who could? But they knew. The humans, the Death Worlders, the cold realization. Settled like ice in their bones, Earth was not coming to negotiate. Earth was not coming for conquest. Earth was coming to end them. In deep space, more battles followed. But they weren't battles in any traditional sense. The human ships never allowed engagements to last longer than minutes. Targets were chosen, identified, destroyed. Survivors, if any, were left not as a sign of weakness, but as a deliberate message. This is how we end wars. In one silent scene, an Imperial dreadnought, a ship thought to be invincible, vanished. Under coordinated strikes, its hull split like paper, its engines detonated, and as the burning wreck tumbled into a nearby planet's gravity well, the watching survivors could only stare in frozen horror. There was no chance to fight back. Number. Chance to regroup. Earth's forces were too fast, too precise. The Death Worlders moved with the cold knowledge of a species that had learned war not from theory, but from survival on the deadliest planet in the galaxy. They had no interest in cruelty. They had no need for terror. They simply acted on board. Eclipse. As more Imperial fleets were erased from the stars, Captain Mara Hale stood in silence. The glow of burning debris reflected in her eyes. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. This wasn't about revenge. This was about a line that had been crossed, a massacre shown to the galaxy. A massacre Earth would not allow to go unanswered. Next. Target in range, her weapons officer murmured. Hale's voice was steady. Proceed. One by one, the Empire's defenses collapsed. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. Entire systems went dark. Imperial colonies, once considered untouchable, were lost without warning. Other species watching from the sidelines felt the chill of true fear. They saw that Earth had no interest in declarations or demands. They saw that the humans fought not for territory or riches, but for something colder. The promise that mercy would never again be given to those who showed none. And so the fleet moved on. No hesitation, no mercy. Only the quiet message burned into every shattered world they left behind. Never again. The cold emptiness between stars glowed with the distant light of shattered ships. The Black Fleet moved without sound, without pause, cutting a clean line of destruction through the heart of the alien empire's territory. But the moment was coming, the first real confrontation, the first attempt by the Empire to stand its ground. Their grand fleet, the pride of their military strength, waited near the border of their inner systems, determined to stop the human advance. They didn't understand. They still believed this was a war they could win. The Empire's grand fleet stretched across the void, hundreds of warships bristling with weapons, their silver hulls shining under the distant light of a blue giant star. Admiral Threx, a towering alien whose claws had led campaigns across half the galaxy, stood proudly on the bridge of the flagship. Around him, officers barked orders. Weapon systems came online. Targeting arrays locked onto distant contacts. "Our few?" Threx growled, his sharp teeth bared in what passed for a grin. "We will crush them." The bridge crew roared in agreement, but none of them noticed the quiet in the void. None of them understood what kind of enemy they were facing. Humans did not broadcast challenges. They did not threaten or posture. The Black Fleet was made of ships that seemed to glide through space like living shadows, their surfaces absorbing light, their movements calm like predators who had already chosen the exact moment they would strike. And then they did. Without warning, without a single word. The human fleet descended upon the Empire's Grand Armada. The first salvo was terrifyingly precise, kinetic, round shrouds of dense metal moving at impossible speeds, punched through the Empire's leading cruisers before their shields could fully react. Explosions bloomed silently in space as entire decks ripped apart in a flash of fire and gas. Beams of white-hot energy carved through ship after ship, slicing them clean in half before their crews had time to scream. The Imperial ships responded, but their weapons fired wildly, desperately, as confusion turned to panic. Admiral Threx roared for order, his claws slamming against the control panels. "Target them! Fire! Bring them down!" But the Deathworlders were already inside the engagement range. They moved like ghosts appearing where no ship should appear, their stealth tech decades ahead of anything the Empire could field. Every time an Imperial gunship locked onto a target, the black ships vanished, reappeared, and struck with surgical violence. Within minutes, the Empire's mighty fleet, the pride of its strength, was broken. A flagship exploded in a cloud of fire and twisted metal. A battlecruiser tried to flee, only to be split in half by a human railgun slug that passed clean through its core. The space around the battlefield glittered with burning wreckage, the shattered remains of a military force that had once ruled with terror, and the humans. They said nothing. On board Eclipse, Captain Mara Hale stood on the observation deck, her arms folded as she watched another enemy cruiser break apart under concentrated fire. Her expression didn't change. She gave no sign of victory. Her orders were soft, measured, calm. "Maintain formation," she said quietly. "No survivors." Her voice held no hate, no anger, just the cold weight of the signal Earth had given. Them all, no more mercy. Far away, across thousands of star systems, alien governments watched the unfolding destruction in growing horror. The live feeds, hacked and leaked by terrified Imperial officers, spread across networks faster than any sensor readings. Entire planetary populations sat in stunned silence as they watched the Empire's great fleet, the same fleet that had massacred the human Colony B, dismantled without hesitation. There was no glory in what the humans did. It was simply efficient, precise. Absolute Admiral Threx's flagship, crippled and burning, drifted into the gravitational pull of a dead moon. Fires raged through its hollowed decks. The command crew lay dead, and Threx himself, his body scorched and bleeding, crawled to the shattered remains of the bridge window. In the distance, he saw it. One human warship, the lead destroyer, hovered. Still, silent, its black hull gleaming like obsidian under the ruined stars. It did not fire again. It did not chase him. It simply drifted, watching, waiting, judging, and then, with terrible finality, a single railgun slug punched through the bridge. The flagship was gone. The battle was over, but the war was not. In the Empire's homeworld, still untouched, still in. Proud Supreme Overlord Vrax stood frozen before the live feed, his four eyes wide with disbelief. The room around him was silent. His advisors, his generals, his priests, none could speak. The humans had not just destroyed the Empire's strongest fleet, they had made it look effortless. For the first time, true fear settled in the Overlord's bones. His claws trembled. His voice, once booming with command, now broke into a whisper. We didn't know," he muttered. "We didn't know what they truly are." The days that followed, as wreckage fields stretched across the edges of the Empire, the Black Fleet moved deeper. There were no demands, no surrender terms. The message was already clear. Mercy was over, and Earth was not finished. The Empire burned. One by one, its outer colonies vanished under silent fire. No declarations, no speeches, no warning. The black ships of Earth's island, precise, cold, moved across the stars like ghosts, leaving behind only ashes and silence. The great alien empire that once ruled half the galaxy with iron claws now staggered like a wounded beast, confused, terrified, powerless to stop what had been set in motion. The retaliation had begun. On distant worlds where imperial banners once flew proudly above shining cities, the sky itself turned black. Human warships slipped into orbit, engines cold, weapons locked, targeting systems calibrated down to the molecular level. The people of those colonies, most of them civilians, stared upward in fear, expecting total annihilation. They had seen the feeds, heard the rumors, the Death Worlders had come. But the humans did not slaughter civilians. They did not wipe cities. From the ground without thought, their strikes were surgical, terrifying in their precision. Military command centers, weapons factories, orbital defense grids, all reduced to molten craters within minutes. And then the ships moved on, leaving civilian populations untouched but broken. Their leadership gone, their armies wiped out. It wasn't war, it was something colder. Something worse. It was justice. In the command chamber of the Imperial Core, World Darn Axis messages arrived in bursts of static and broken screams. One colony lost, then another, then a third. The Empire's top admirals' creatures bred for work elapsed into chaos. Some demanded immediate surrender, others screamed for counterattacks. But there was no one left to command, no fleets left to send, and through it all, Earth remained silent. On board the lead human ship Eclipse, Captain Mara Hale watched the latest strike with steady eyes. The feed showed the destruction of an Imperial weapons factory, once the largest producer of anti-human munitions, now reduced to glowing rubble. Her voice never rose, her expression never changed. "Next target," she said softly. Her officers obeyed without question. This was not about revenge. This was not about hate. This was about the line that had been crossed the moment the alien empire broadcasted the massacre of the human colony. A line that could never be uncrossed. And now, Earth had decided, no more mercy. The strikes continued. A planetary fortress, centured 4 centuries, fell. Within 20 minutes, an orbital shipyard once considered unassailable crumbled under coordinated railgun barrages, and still the Death Worlders spared the civilian populations. Not out of weakness, but out of terrifying clarity. This was a message written in fire and steel. If you attack the innocent, if you slaughter without cause, Earth will come. And when Earth comes, there will be nothing left standing. On the surface of one half-burned colony, a young alien mother clutched her child as the human ships passed overhead. She expected death. She expected the sky to fall. But instead, the black ships slid silently across the heavens without a single shot fired at her people. The Imperial Army bases were gonyas, the command towers reduced to ashes. Her city still stood. Her people still lived, and in her heart, for the first time, a terrible understanding grew. The humans were not monsters. They were something worse. They were absolute in the Empire's core worlds. Supreme Overlord Vrax fell into despair. His grand armies, those that had once marched across star systems, were now reduced to isolated pockets of fear. His fleets, those that once brought terror to every corner of the galaxy, were floating wreckage in cold space, and Earth still had not spoken a single word in the high temples of the Empire's oldest cities. The priests began to whisper the unthinkable, that perhaps they had awoken something that should have been left in peace. That perhaps the massacre of the human colony, meant to show strength, had instead invited extinction. Even other alien species, once eager to remain neutral, now sent hidden messages to Earth's commanders. Secret transmissions offering apologies, denials, even promises of tribute, but none were answered. The Black Fleet moved with the silence of executioners, each strike burning the memory of the massacre deeper into galactic history. In one ruined, system, an Empire general, his face pale. His armor cracked stood alone among the wreckage of his command base. Above him, black ships hovered. The humans did not fire. They did not need to. The general dropped his weapon and fell to his knees. Knowing he had already lost, knowing that the old rules of galactic war meant nothing now, and as the humans moved on to the next target, the galaxy trembled. There was no celebration on Earth. No joy. No parades. The people of Earth, the true death world, watched the retaliation unfold with cold eyes. They remembered the images of the murdered colony. They remembered the silence that followed. And they understood the choice that had been made. No more mercy. On-board Eclipse. As another Imperial world's defenses crumbled, Captain Hale allowed herself one quiet breath. Just one. She knew this was far from over. She knew the final strike would come soon. The message was not yet fully written, but with every shattered fleet, with every silenced command post, Earth's answer echoed louder and louder across the stars. Never again. The Empire was crumbling. One by one, its proud banners fell. Fleets once the largest in the galaxy, silent and broken across the cold blackness of space. Its armies, the same soldiers who had once cheered during the massacre of the human colony, were gone, wiped from existence in battles that lasted only minutes. And through it all, Earth remained silent. But the message was clear. No more mercy. On the Empire's last remaining capital world, Xavier ruled. The tall towers that once glittered with power were dark. The streets once alive with military parades stood empty. The sky above the world was filled with the distant shapes of human warships, silent and still, waiting like shadows. Deathworlders had arrived. Inside the heart of the Imperial Palace, Supreme Overlord Varax, the creature who had ordered the massacre, stood shaking before his generals. His once proud claws trembled. His eyes were wide with terror. The room smelled of fear. No one shouted orders now. No one spoke of victory. Only the desperate question filled the air. What do we do? For days they had tried to mount defenses. For days they had begged for reinforcements. But Earth's retaliation moved too fast. Every fleet sent was destroyed before it reached its destination. Every fortress was shattered. Every outpost silenced. The humans fought with cold precision, without hatred, without emotion, striking with the quiet certainty of a species that knew exactly how to end a war, and now they were here. The capital was next. Vrax dropped to his knees, his voice breaking. As he finally whispered the words no emperor before him had ever dared speak, send a message. Beg them to stop. A young aide, his scales pale with fear, nodded quickly. The message was prepared. It was simple. A single line broadcast across every known frequency. We surrender. We beg for mercy. The galaxy heard it. Species. Across the stars, some allies of the Empire, some neutral, watched in stunned disbelief. The Empire, once the most feared power in this region of space, had fallen to its knees. It had taken less than 2 weeks. The news feeds burned with images of shattered warships, broken planetary defenses, and above all, silent. Black human vessels hovering without expression or demand, but the humans did not answer. They did not. Stop in the void above the Empire's capital, the lead human warship Eclipse held position. Its engines burned low. Its weapons were online. On board, Captain Mara Hale stood at the observation window, her cold eyes fixed on the planet below. Around her, her crew moved in silence, their faces as hard as the steel around them. The message from the Empire played on a quiet loop. Again and again, we surrender. We beg for mercy. No one in the human fleet spoke. No one responded. Because the Deathworlders had not come for words. They had come for justice. Captain Hale's voice was soft but steady. Prepare ground teams. Target military command structures only. No civilian casualties. Her officers obeyed without hesitation. This was not revenge. This was not slaughter. It was precise. It was necessary. Humans had not chosen this war. But once it was forced upon them, once the massacre of innocents had been broadcast to the galaxy, they had chosen their answer. No more mercy. On the surface of the capital world, panic spread like wildfire. The people, those who had once cheered, their leaders now wept in the streets. Some tried to flee. Some knelt in prayer. Some simply stood frozen, staring up at the sky where the dark shapes of the human fleet hung like silent gods of death. But the humans did not bomb cities. They did not fire on civilians. Instead, at precise points across the planet, beams of energy lanced from orbit, cutting clean through government palaces, military fortresses, weapons factories. Entire command structures collapsed in seconds. The Empire's leadership was erased without warning, without waste. The surgical strikes were so precise that nearby buildings stood untouched. And still, not a single word from Earth. In the underground bunkers where the last of the Empire's high command hid, terror gave way to despair. One general, a creature who had once mocked humanity's weakness, tore at his own armor. His voice rising in broken sobs, "They will never stop." He wept. "We've awakened something we can't control." And far above, in the void where the human fleet stood silent, Captain Hale closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of the colony. The images of the massacre still burned in her mind. Children, the screams. The fire. She thought of the order she had been given, the one simple command that every soldier on every ship followed without question: no more mercy. The retaliation would continue until the Empire no longer posed a threat. Not one soldier, not one weapon, not one ship. The Death Worlders would not erase civilians. They would not wipe out entire populations. But they would ensure that those who ordered the massacre, those who celebrated it, those who stood silent, while it happened, would never raise a hand against humanity again. Across the galaxy, the fear grew. Other powers, the ones who had watched from the sidelines, now sent frantic messages to Earth, offers of peace, pleas for understanding. Earth did not respond. The Black Fleet moved without speeches, without anger. They acted with the cold discipline of a species forged on a planet where survival was written into every breath, every drop of blood. The retaliation was not yet over, and as the sun set over the broken capital of the Empire, the people on the ground looked up and saw the black ships still watching, still silent, still waiting, because Earth was not here to conquer. Earth was here to finish what had begun, and it would not stop until the message was complete. The Empire was shattered. Its cities lay silent. Its armies were gone. The mighty fleets that once ruled the stars were nothing but wreckage, spinning through cold space. Yet still, the black ships of Earth hovered in the dark sky, motionless, cold, and watching. The Death Worlders had not come to negotiate. They had not come for territory or riches. They had come for one thing only: to ensure that the massacre would never be repeated. The silence was worse than any weapon. On the ground, among the ruins of what had once been the Imperial capital, the alien survivors whispered in terror. They had surrendered. They had begged, but no answer came. The human ships above made no demands. They delivered no speeches, struck only with cold, ruthless precision, removing every trace of military threat without touching a single civilian. Home, and then they waited. In one broken square of the ruined city, Supreme Overlord Vrax stood in chains. The great leader who had once ordered the slaughter of the human colony, who had once broadcast the massacre to the galaxy with cruel laughter, now stood small, weak, trembling. Around him, his remaining generals and advisors knelt in the dust. Above them, a black ship descended, its engines whisper quiet, its dark hull shining like the surface of some ancient predator. The people of the Empire watched in silence. They did not resist. They did not flee. They understood now, far too late, the terrible mistake that had been made. They had looked down on humans. They had called Earth soft. But they had forgotten one thing. Earth was a death world, and when pushed too far, its people responded in only one way: by ending the threat completely. The ship touched down without sound. Its ramp lowered, and for the first time, the people of the Empire saw them up close. The Death Worlders. They looked ordinary, not monsters, not beasts. Just men and women, clad in black armor without insignia. Their faces were cold, expressionless. Their eyes held the weight of something far older than the Empire's proud history, something carved into the bones of every human. Survival. Captain Mara Hale stepped forward, her boots crunched softly. On the shattered stone, she carried no flag, no bright banners. Her helmet was off, her face calm, unreadable. Behind her, her team moved with quiet precision. No weapons were raised. There was no need. Vrax dropped to his knees, his claws shaking. "Please," he whispered. "Please, I surrender. I surrender." "We meant it was only—" His voice broke into a sob. Mara said nothing for a long moment. Wind howled through the broken buildings. Dust rose in thin spirals. The people, thousands of them, watched in frozen silence. Somewhere far above, the black ship still hovered, silent sentinels over the broken empire. Finally, Mara's voice cut through the air. Quiet, steady. "You broadcast the murder of children," she said. Her words were simple, clear. "You celebrated their deaths," Vrax whimpered. "It was meant to frighten, it did," she said. "But not the way you thought." Her eyes never left his. She did not scream. She did not curse. The Death Worlders did not speak of vengeance because this was never about rage. This was about survival, about sending a message no one in the galaxy would ever forget. With a single hand signal, her team moved. The Empire's remaining military leaders, the ones who had ordered the massacre, were separated from the crowd. No trial. No speeches. It was done with the same cold efficiency the humans had shown from the first. Strike quick, surgical final. The Death Worlders did not touch civilians. They did not harm the innocent. They left families untouched. But for those who had given the orders, those who had unleashed the slaughter, there was no escape, no mercy, no forgiveness. Within the hour, the executions were complete. The people of the Empire, left alive but broken, watched in silence as the humans departed. No more words were spoken. The black ships lifted silently from the ground, engines as quiet as the grave. They rose into the dark sky and vanished into the endless cold of space and across the galaxy. The message burned brighter than fire. This is how Death Worlders answer. Other species, watching from distant systems, shivered in their cities. They had seen the feeds. They had heard the surrender. They had seen how Earth responded not with wild destruction, not with chaos, but with terrifying discipline, with cold certainty. The massacre that had been broadcast to mock humanity had instead summoned something far worse than anger. It had awakened Earth's ancient instinct to end threats completely, and the galaxy would never forget. On board the Eclipse, Captain Hale stood once more at the observation window as the Empire's broken world drifted below. She said nothing. There was no victory in her face, no triumph. Only the heavy weight of duty. A young officer finally whispered, "Orders, Captain." Her voice was quiet. "We return. Mission complete." The officer hesitated. Do you think they understand now?" Mara's eyes stayed fixed on the stars. "They understand," she said softly. "They'll never forget." Hey. The engines roared quietly to life. The Black Fleet turned from the ruins. There was no need to destroy the Empire further. Its will was broken. Its armies were gone. Its people would carry the memory of Earth's answer for generations. And so the Death Worlders left silent, cold, and watching, because they knew the galaxy had learned a lesson written in fire and steel. Earth's mercy had limits, and once crossed, those limits never returned. The galaxy was quiet. For the first time in living memory, the great empire, the one that had ruled through fear, through violence, through the cold crushing of any who dared to resist, was silent. Its banners, once raised high above shining towers, lay tattered and forgotten. Its proud fleets, once the iron fist of its will, drifted as silent wrecks in the endless cold of space. and above the ashes of what once was, the black ships of Earth vanished back into the darkness. They did not stay to rule. They did not stay to take. They left nothing but the memory on every world and every system. The story spread like wildfire. The empire had fallen, not to another empire. Not to invaders seeking territory, but to a single word that echoed across the stars. No more mercy. In the ruins of broken cities, survivors whispered the names of the Death Worlders with trembling voices. Some wept, some prayed, others simply stood in silent awe, too afraid to speak of what they had seen. The humans had not come like monsters. They had not screamed for blood. They had arrived without warning, struck with surgical precision, and left with the same cold silence they had carried since the first shot. The signal, one that had started everything, still played in some corners of the galaxy. The massacre of the human colony, once broadcast by the Empire to mock and terrify, was now forbidden on countless worlds. No one dared watch it now. No one dared speak of it without shame, because now they all understood. Earth was not a world of conquerors. Earth was something worse. It was a world where mercy had limits. A world where survival meant nothing was ever forgotten, nothing was ever forgiven, once the line was crossed.
Ow!
And when pushed too far, Earth did not come to bargain.
Ow!
It came to end. On board the Eclipse, as the last stars of Empire space faded, behind them, Captain Mara Hale stood alone on the observation deck. The stars stretched out forever, cold, beautiful, untouched. The fleet around Black ships silent and steady moved in formation, returning home. The war was over. Retaliation was complete. Her face, calm, as always, held no triumph. No joy. Only the weight of what had been done. A soft voice came over the comms. All ships reporting complete withdrawal. No resistance, no pursuit. She nodded once, understood. Silence returned. For a long time, Mara stood there without moving, her hands behind her back, her breath soft against the glass. She remembered the faces of the colony men, women, children. She remembered the images of fire and death that the Empire had so proudly broadcast. She remembered the moment when Earth, for the first time in generations, had said enough, and in her heart she knew the galaxy would never be the same. Back on Earth, the news spread not with celebration, but with quiet relief. The people did not cheer. There were no parades. Instead, families gathered lighting candles for the fallen. Cities held moments of silence. The names of the colony dead were spoken aloud in every language. And in every home, on every screen, one phrase appeared again and again. Never again it. It was not a promise of conquest. It was not a threat of destruction. It was a simple truth. Earth would not strike first. Earth would not seek empire. But if the innocent were touched, if the line was crossed, Dearth would answer. And that answer would be final in distant corners of the galaxy. Other powers once watching quietly took the lesson to heart. Treaties were rewritten. Aggressive plans were shelved. Those who had once mocked humans as soft or weak now spoke of Deathworlders with careful respect. The images of black warships hovering silently over shattered worlds would haunt the galaxy's history forever, even in the Empire's remaining cities that had been spared. The new generation grew up with different words carved into their minds. No longer did they speak of conquest. No longer did they dream of war. They remembered the black ships, remembered the cold eyes. They remembered the precise way the Deathworlders had ended the nightmare. And they remembered mercy, because they had seen what it meant when mercy was taken away. In the end, Earth had not destroyed the Empire, did not burn the civilians. It had not wiped worlds clean, but it had made one thing very, very clear. To raise a hand against humanity, to slaughter without reason, never again be tolerated. Not now, not ever. On board the Eclipse, as the fleet crossed back into neutral, Space Mara Hale gave the final order. "Stand down," she said softly. "Take us home." Her voice barely carried above the hum of the engines, but every soul aboard heard it. The weight lifted. The mission dark, heavy, necessary was done. The fleet turned toward the blue jewel of Earth far across the stars. The black ships faded into the night, and somewhere in the cold heart of a silent galaxy, the words remain carved into every shattered world, written into the blood of history: no more mercy.